Rain lashes down on the sweeping concrete curves of San Siro. A loose ball is scooped up. Three quick, incisive passes cut through the gloom. Jair races clear and slips it under the diving keeper. 90,000 people freeze and then breathe out as one. The bolt holds. Could anyone pick the lock to this fortress? Football's economy of risk was shifting. In an era where goals were incredibly precious, a single strike could define an entire season. Helenio Herrera looked at this truth and made peace with it. He wagered that absolute discipline and a spare man behind the line would tilt probability in his favor far more than flair ever could. He rewired the way risk felt on a football pitch. By placing a spare man, a sweeper, deep behind the defensive line, he built an iron wall. But this was only half the trap. He demanded his players break like lightning the second they won the ball. It looked utterly simple to the eye, but the mechanism was devastating. Back-to-back European Cup triumphs in 1964 and 1965 propelled this team into the realm of legends. They were only the third team after Real Madrid and Benfica to retain the continental crown. Across Europe, people argued over coffee and wine about the doorbolt. Was it ugly, or was it a masterpiece of control? The roots of this system actually lay beyond the borders of Italy. Before Herrera arrived in Milan, the concept was born in the Swiss mountains. In the 1930s and 40s, a coach named Karl Rappan placed a spare man behind his defense. He called it the verrou, a French word that translates literally to a doorbolt, a single man sweeping danger away. It was in Italy that the bolt was hardened into steel. Rocco took the concept and forged it in the fires of Italian football at Triestina and Padova. He then conquered Europe with Milan in 1963, using this very system. The shape of Catenaccio had firmly arrived on the peninsula. The stage was set for a master. Helenio Herrera did not invent Catenaccio. Instead, he became its greatest architect. He fused the spare man with blistering speed, obsessive preparation, and theatrical showmanship. He took a blunt defensive tool and engineered it into a ruthless, counter-attacking machine. He made the heavy bolt move at pace, selling his grand vision to a city desperate for glory. When Herrera arrived at Internazionale in 1960, a revolution began. By 1963, his methods delivered a league title. Then came a golden age. They conquered Italy again in 1965 and 1966. They claimed the summit of Europe twice. This was no fleeting moment of luck. It was a dynasty built on routine, nerve, and relentless belief. His most profound innovations happened entirely off the ball and often off the pitch. He was a pioneer of sports psychology before the term even existed in football. He instituted the retiro, taking the team on strict retreats. He enforced severe diets and curfews. He painted fierce slogans on the dressing room walls. Discipline turned into 1,000 small advantages every single week. Herrera distilled his entire philosophy into one chillingly brilliant phrase: the match is played before it is even played. He shifted the burden of risk from the 90 minutes on the pitch to the endless hours of preparation. He trained the mind to be as sharp as the legs. Every exit pass was rehearsed, every scenario mapped, ensuring the game unfolded exactly as he desired. To understand the machine, you must look at its foundations. Picture a heavy chain with one single free link hanging behind it. Armando Pichi was that free man. The captain, the libero. The word simply means free. He did not stick to a single attacker. He read the geometry of the danger unfolding in front of him, sweeping up any loose hope. In front of Pichi stood the enforcers. Tarcisio Bergnish and Aristide Guarneri were the stoppers who threw their bodies into the fire. They engaged the strikers, taking the heavy first contact. Out on the left flank, Giacinto Facchetti possessed long, graceful strides that coiled like a spring. He could lock down the wing 1 second and launch forward like an arrow the next. Behind this fearsome blockade stood Giuliano Sarti. He was a goalkeeper of immense calm. No frantic shouts, no panic. He was the final unbreakable lock. But he was also the silent start of the counterattack. He gathered crosses and instantly rolled the ball out with clean, simple passes. He possessed a gift for making impossible saves look utterly quiet. Just ahead of the defensive wall sat the mastermind of the operation, Luis Suárez, the elegant Spanish playmaker. He dropped deep into the role of a regista, a beautiful word for the director of the play. While others fought in the trenches, he stood in pockets of space with his head up, pointing his baton exactly where the next dramatic scene should unfold. His right foot was the switch that instantly turned a defensive block into a lethal attack. Suárez had the vision to drop a 40-yard diagonal pass precisely into the path of a sprinting teammate. One tackle, one pass, and the entire landscape of the match tilted. It was never a chaotic hoof forward. It was drilled perfection. Win the ball, release, arrive. The shape of the team breathed with the game. When out of possession, Inter contracted into a five-man barricade with a sweeper lurking behind. Passing lanes vanished. The penalty area became an airless room. Attackers found themselves swallowed by blue and black shirts, with absolutely no room to turn or face the goal. But when the ball was won, the trap sprang open. The team stretched beautifully across the grass. At times, they morphed into a dynamic formation, pinning opposing wingers high up the pitch. This was the genius of their elasticity. Facchetti was given the freedom to fly down the touchline, joining the forwards in a terrifying surge of numbers and speed. The rigid tactical labels of the era could never truly capture their movement. To call them 5-3-2 or 4-2-4 was to describe a photograph, not a film. They were fluid snapshots of a living system. In real time, it was the shifting of roles and the rehearsed triggers that mattered far more than numbers. The ultimate validation arrived in Vienna on the 27th of May, 1964. The old kings of Europe, Real Madrid, pushed forward in their famous white shirts. Inter simply waited. Then they sprang the trap. The ball was swept clean. Suárez saw the run, drawing a perfect arc across the sky. Sandro Mazzola arrived, cutting inside for a clinical finish. Mazzola scored twice on that historic night. Aurelio Milani added another. Inter dismantled Real Madrid 3-1 at the Prater Stadium. Those goals were lightning strikes from deep. They were built on the principle of using a handful of passes at most. Sweep the danger, find Suárez, hit the devastating diagonal, and arrive in the box with lethal intent. The following year delivered the ultimate test of their nerve. In the European Cup semifinal, Liverpool battered Inter 3-1 at Anfield. The Red Stands roared into the night. Inter returned to Milan bruised, facing a mountainous deficit. The second leg would test the structural integrity of the bolt in ways that had never been asked of it before. Under the lights of San Siro, the second leg became a tactical masterclass. Early on, a quick free kick caught the red shirts completely asleep. Mario Corso bent the ball in smartly. Moments later, a razor-sharp transition ended with Joaquin Peiro finding the net. Inter triumphed 3-0 on the night, progressing 4-3 on aggregate in a stunning display of cunning. Whispers and arguments still circle about the decisions of that night, but that is part of the enduring myth. The underlying lesson was crystal clear. Herrera wanted to trim the uncontrollable risks of open play. He sought to turn the danger into rehearsed set plays and lightning breaks that could be perfectly scripted. It was all about controlling the moments that truly mattered. Then came the final storm, Milan, the 27th of May, 1965. Rain poured onto a glassy pitch. Benfica, driven by the magnificent Eusebio, circled the penalty area. Inter sat deep in their shell, waiting. A loose ball finally flicked free. 3 rapid passes later, Jair drove a shot through the rain and under the keeper. 1-0 to the Masters. Yet the defining image of that era is not the winning goal. It is a desperate save. Eusebio breaks clear, 1-on-1. Sardi rushes out, spreads himself wide like a star, and denies him. That brilliant block was the final lock slamming shut. The danger of the game was relocated from the vast green expanse to a few incredibly narrow controllable moments. Out of this supposedly rigid defensive structure emerged a magnificent surprise. Giacinto Facchetti scored 10 league goals in the 1965 to 1966 season. It was an astonishing haul for a defender. Surging forward, he looked and finished like a seasoned striker. In a system famous for shutting games down, he completely redefined what an attacking fullback could be. Starting his run from a defensive back five, he could become a third striker in a matter of seconds. His success revealed a truth that critics often missed. Catenaccio did not kill adventure. It simply timed it. Those long, galloping strides only happened when the tactical drill dictated it was safe to go. It was calculated risk, executed with devastating grace. The statistics of the time reveal exactly why this philosophy flourished. In mid-60s Italy, league matches averaged a mere 2 goals a game. The margins between glory and failure were incredibly thin. Clean sheets were worth their weight in gold. Winning 1-0 felt like building an impenetrable fortress, a marginal gain that rewarded extreme discipline week after week. Inter's championship seasons consistently boasted the stingiest defenses in the country. While exact tallies vary in the history books, the dominant pattern remains entirely clear. In that unforgiving landscape, one safe, calculated exit pass held far more value than 5 thrilling but risky dribbles. It was a cold, pragmatic trade-off, and Helenio Herrera made that trade better than anyone else. The exact same pragmatism ruled away from the stadium. The Retiro moved the players away from the distractions of the city and into a secluded, quiet base. Strict diets and early curfews protected tired legs. It turned 1,000 small lifestyle choices into marginal edges on the field. Over the brutal grind of a long season, those tiny edges blossomed into vital points. His slogans forged a shared mythology. He that gives everything gives nothing less than victory. Win the battle before you step on the pitch. Herrera also played the media like a grand piano. He soaked up the intense pressure of the press so his players could focus on their craft. That is exactly how he earned his famous nickname, Il Mago. The echo of his tactical revolution reached far beyond the foggy streets of Milan. The concept of the libero traveled across borders. Think of Franz Beckenbauer years later, elegantly stepping out of defense with absolute freedom. The seed of a free mage reading the geometry of the game from the deepest position took root and flourished all over the European continent. But inevitably, the tactical pendulum swung back. The fierce backlash arrived in the shape of Arrigo Sacchi's Milan in the late 1980s. Sacchi employed high pressing and a strict zonal line. There was no longer a spare man. He compressed the field and squeezed the time players had to think. It was designed as the direct antidote to the sweeping bolt. In the decades of heated debate that followed, a beautiful realization began to dawn. Absolute control can possess its own kind of beauty. True beauty can simply be the feeling of holding a chaotic game firmly in your hands. It is a different kind of romance to the flair of all-out attack, but it is a deep, resonant romance nonetheless. A few historical caveats help us understand this legacy properly. Helenio Herrera popularized Catenaccio, but he did not invent it out of thin air. The numerical formations we use to describe his team are oversimplifications, because roles constantly shifted depending on who had the ball. And while the historical data from the 60s is fragmented, the overarching truth of their dominance is entirely undeniable. We lean on grainy film reels and faded match reports, but the pattern always holds true. A spare man allied with rehearsed, explosive exits turned deep risk into spectacular reward. The fundamental question he posed still lives in the modern game. How much risk do you dare to take, and how much control do you truly crave? That is why the legend of the Bolt endures. If this story brought back exactly why you fell in love with the game, there is so much more waiting for you here. Inkpitch tells these timeless stories slowly, warmly, and by the fire. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please subscribe to the channel. We draw football's greatest legends by hand, and we tell their stories without the noise of the modern world. Drop a like, and we will see you very soon for the next story.